Good evening and welcome to another fantastic program brought to you by the Pueblo City County Library District and the Arkansas Valley Audubon Society, Arkansas Valley chapter of the Audubon Society. I'm here tonight with two special guests. We have Peg Rooney, a regular guest, I guess, maybe not a special guest. She is special. And we have Richard O'Brien with the International Dark Sky Association Colorado chapter. Good evening, both of you. And now I will, my name is Aaron with the library, and I'm going to pass it off to Peg.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. I want to welcome you all here tonight and remind you that we've lost billions of birds since the 70s. Primarily due to human development, climate change, and habitat destruction. So if you care about birds and you want to protect them and their habitats, one of the best ways you can do that is to join the Audubon Society. And membership information is on our website, Southern Colorado Birds, abbreviated SOCO, so socobirds.org. And we hope you'll join us in our fight to protect the birds that we love. And now I'll turn things over to Richard.
Hi, thanks. Thank you, Peg. Thank you for the invitation.
You bet.
And thanks to Aaron with the library for helping host this event tonight. I appreciate it very much. I just lost my presentation. Let me try this again. There we go. Okay. So we're here to talk about nocturnal bird migration tonight.
I'm sorry, Richard, if I could interrupt. If you would share that screen again, because we don't have it yet.
Okay. Let's see.
Okay, it's coming up. Just about there. Perfect. All right. We'll leave you to it.
Okay. Now we're good. Now I'm hoping everyone is seeing a title slide that says nocturnal bird migration. So anyway, that's what we're here to talk about tonight is nocturnal bird migration. My name is Richard O'Brien. I'm with the International Dark Sky Association. I'm an enthusiastic volunteer, and I'm really excited to be here with you tonight because I just love talking about birds and the wonderful things that they can do and the joy that they bring to our lives. Unfortunately, they also need our help, and so we'll get to that in just a second. So the plan for tonight is first to talk about what Lights Out Colorado is, what this program is, and what are the other sources of information on nocturnal bird migration in the local area. Secondly, why is light pollution a problem for migratory birds? And third, what are the practical solutions? And there's good news here. There is stuff that we can do to make the problem go away. So I hope that you're excited by this and interested in this, and I encourage you to use the chat or comment function in your Facebook or YouTube app to present questions, and Aaron will pass them along to me as the night proceeds. So the program, Lights Out Colorado program, is a program to help migratory birds by limiting light pollution. Now, why do they need our help? Well, we'll talk about that. The program is sponsored jointly by two different organizations. One is my organization, the Colorado chapter of the International Dark Sky Association, and the other is Denver Audubon. But probably more importantly are the hundreds of individual people throughout the state of Colorado who have offered to support Lights Out Colorado in one way or another. A few of these people are Audubon members. A few of these people are IDA members, and many of these people belong to neither organization, and that's fine. And we don't ask for any money from anybody. Some people have given money, but we operate on a shoestring budget. It's a very small budget. We don't have any paid employees at all. So how do we learn more about bird migration, particularly in Pueblo County? Well, there are 3 resources that I hope you're familiar with. One is Birdcast Migration Dashboard with links to eBird, and this has radar information about what happened last night. And here's what the Birdcast Migration Dashboard looks like. You see in the upper left-hand corner here, it says Birdcast Migration Dashboard, and you see that it's set to Pueblo County, Colorado. So it's not the whole world, it's just Pueblo County. I've set it to Pueblo County, Colorado. And this particular night that I'm displaying here was from September 8th, which was last Thursday night. And there was this huge surge of bird migration over Pueblo. 1.3 million birds in the air over Pueblo at one time on that night. It was like 2:30 in the morning, and so many of you were probably asleep when this happened. But if it had been daylight, you certainly would have noticed, because 1.3 million birds, that's 10 times as many people as live in Pueblo. So you would certainly have noticed this. The weather event that happened that caused this was a front that moved through, and you can see down here, the radar tells us that the average bird speed went up from about 20 miles per hour to nearly 60 miles an hour during this weather event. As this front was moving in, there was like a 40-mile-an-hour north wind blowing, and 1.3 million birds were taking to the air to take advantage of this tailwind. Many of the birds might have started clear up in northern Colorado, maybe near Fort Collins. They came through Pueblo County with the front, and they probably ended their night somewhere in New Mexico on their migratory journeys. So this was really, really quite an interesting event to happen. This middle column here shows radar information from last night to compare with every night in this migratory season. So in gray here, in the gray background, is the average of what we would expect for most nights in the fall migration season in Pueblo County. This night was obviously much, much larger than normal. So it shows that this green line going way up because this was a way over average night. And clearly, if birds could go 60 miles an hour on their migratory journey, that's a real advantage. Birds normally can fly about 20 or 25 miles an hour through still air, but the radar shows that these birds were going like 60 miles an hour as they crossed Pueblo County. So very fast. They were flying roughly 2,000 feet above the ground on average. Some of them a little lower, some of them a little higher, but way up there, and mostly small birds, songbirds and such. And so even if it were light out, you would only see tiny, tiny specks way, way up in the sky. And you wouldn't see the typical, like we expect during the daylight to see Canada geese migrating in their V at low altitudes. You wouldn't see that with this nocturnal migration because it happens much higher and the birds are much smaller. And of course, it happens during the dark, so no one can see it anyway. This third column here is, I think, probably the most important column of all, and that is expected nocturnal migrants. Now, the radar can't figure out which bird is which species in the middle of the night. So this is actually, I'm going to go to, there we go. Can you still see my screen? So this is the actual live website, so I can scroll around and click it and such. But the external, the most expected migrants would be in this list down here. And this is powered by eBird, which means that it basically comes from this massive database of information on birds. And to give you an idea, if I click on this yellow warbler here, then I get the eBird website for yellow warbler and find out all kinds of additional information about the yellow warbler. And I have gone ahead and preset this for Pueblo, Colorado. And so the statistics that this shows are for Pueblo County and not for anywhere else in the world, just Pueblo County. The pictures down here are all pictures from Pueblo County. So you can see where your neighbors were when they took the photo of this bird and exactly when they took it. Now, some of these go back quite a few years. Here's one from 2013. So that's quite a few years ago. But there are certainly some more recent ones too. And a total of over 3,000 observations of this bird in the database. So this is just a tremendous resource. Now I'm going to try to go back to the presentation here. Okay, now most of this information, the graphical information on the left, is based on radar information. And this is what a radar view of the entire country looks like. And it turns out that we have radar stations all over the United States, and that we can put together a composite of what's going on all over the United States. Now let me see if I can go to the YouTube version, and you can see that. This is the United States. Here are the white dots represent all of the radar stations all across the country. And then if I advance it a little bit farther, we see what the radar looks like, and you might be kind of confused by this at first. It's partly weather. Here's the weather stuff. Okay, you see that weather stuff, and the weather forecasters filter out the birds before they show this on TV so that you don't see the birds on TV usually when you see this. But the bird researchers do the opposite. They filter out the weather and look at the birds. And almost everything you see on the screen here are radar images of birds in flight. Now let me just advance this a little bit farther here. This is a time lapse of every day and night for all of April and May of 2019. And this shows both weather and bird migration going on. And you'll notice that in the center of the US and in the east, it's really strong in April. There's a lot of bird migration going on. And it's not until May that we start to get more activity in Colorado. And if you see Colorado, and there's Pueblo right there. So, you know, if you can see my mouse, that's where you are right now. And that's was going on in bird migration in that particular spring of 2019. Now let me go back to here. We already talked about the eBird information. This is information on red-headed woodpecker, which is not one of the ones in the expected migrants tonight, but that's just another one that we would expect to see. And then statistics from Pueblo County about this bird. So that's the Birdcast Migration Dashboard with links to eBird. And that gives radar information about what happened last night. And even more interesting, it gives live radar information. So after sunset tonight, we can tune in to that Birdcast Migration Dashboard, and we can see live radar information coming in on what's happening in Pueblo County in terms of bird migration. So you can't beat that. That's, you know, live information is really incredible and really fun to watch. And then from that same dashboard, you can figure out what birds you're likely to see the next day on the ground in Pueblo when you go out and look in the morning. So that's really exciting to have that resource available. This resource has only been up for a few months now. It's really rather new, and so we're all still getting used to using it. The second resource I want to mention is CSU's, Colorado State University's aeroecolab.com. And this organization is probably the leading research organization in nocturnal bird migration in the United States. They partner with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology to produce that birdcast website that we were just looking at, but they also have their own Colorado-based website called CSU Aero Eco Lab, and it's just aeroecolab.com is the URL for that, and they give Colorado-specific forecasts of bird migration, so you can see what's forecast to happen tonight, tomorrow night, and the next night. And this was a while back when I captured that screenshot. Let me look at the live page. Here's the live page. So tonight we're expecting 7 million birds in flight over Colorado. Tomorrow night, 6.1 million. And you can see these red areas are the areas with the most intense migration activity. Then 2 nights away, a little bit less migration predicted. So that's what we're looking at. That's CSU's Aero Eco Lab. Aero Eco Lab, by the way, is in Fort Collins, not in Pueblo, but it is CSU, Colorado State University. The third resource I want to make sure everyone listening knows about is the Lights Out Colorado website. And I'm encouraging you all to join. It's completely free, and it puts you on an email list. Here is what the homepage looks like. Okay, but the feature I'm wanting to highlight is that you can join our email list, and by giving us your email address, and we'll be careful to keep it private. You don't have to be an Audubon member or an IDA member to join. You don't have to pay anything to join, but you get 2 or 3 emailed updates every migration season with news about bird migration in Colorado. So I encourage you to to do that. And the website there is somewhere here. It's Lights Out Colorado. Let me find it here. Let's see.
I popped it into the chat.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
No problem.
So the basic requests from Lights Out Colorado are that we shield outdoor lights to prevent light from being emitted upwards, and that we turn off lights as early as possible during bird migration seasons, which are April and May for the spring and August and September for the fall. Now, I'm going to keep repeating that over and over tonight, so hopefully that will be memorable. Shielding and turning off lights are the 2 requests, the 2 things that we can do. So why is this a problem? Why do we have to do this at all? Well, first of all, almost 4 billion birds migrate every year in North America. 4 billion birds. 80% of those travel at night. Very few people know that most of them, over 3 billion birds travel at night. And these are even birds that are active during the day, mostly birds that are active during the day. Normally, they change their schedules and migrate at night. So they are all flying, and we're just completely unaware of it because we're asleep. But they do amazing things at night, and we'll talk about that some more in just a second. But light pollution, our human light pollution, interferes with their ability to navigate. They've been doing this for millennia, long before humans had artificial lights. And they use the stars to navigate, and so light pollution is a real problem. So a couple of years ago, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology did a research study, and they found that 2.5 billion migratory birds have been lost in North America since 1970. In other words, we have 2.5 billion fewer migratory birds now than we had in 1970. It's huge. And in some species, it's even worse. They call out their Baltimore orioles. The loss is something like 40% of those birds. And the researchers' best hypothesis as to why this is happening, one of the top possibilities is light pollution. And so this is really urgent. There's evidence that this is happening faster and faster as time goes by. And so it won't take another 50 years to lose another 2 billion birds. We will go through that in real hurry if we don't make any changes. So this is really urgent. Now, the good news is you and I, people watching this tonight, can make a difference and help save birds' lives. And I encourage you to do that after we talk tonight. So what are the problems for migrating birds? What in the world does artificial light, what problem does it cause for these migrants? Well, first example, there's a tribute in light in New York City that happens one night each year on September 11th. And in this tribute in light, there is glare from unshielded lights that cause thousands of birds to circle in confusion. And here's what it looks like if you were on the ground near New York City on September 11th. You would see something like this. There are these two incredibly intense beams used to simulate the missing World Trade Center towers. And so it's kind of a nice display, but it has this unfortunate side effect of attracting huge numbers of birds. Now that photo shows the lights have been on for like 15 minutes, and there are roughly 16,000 birds caught in those lights. They're circling in confusion. They don't know which direction to fly. And as you know, September is a big migration time in New York as it is in Colorado. And so there were lots of birds flying south past New York, and they basically get caught by this light, and they end up circling around in the light, and they can't see any stars, or they can't tell what direction to go. Now, the radar images, the one on the left is with the lights off. So that's what the radar would look like if the lights were off. And there would still be roughly 500 birds within a half a kilometer of the tribute in light. But once they turn the light on, after only 15 minutes, there are almost 16,000 birds circling around these lights. 16,000 birds. And one way that they found to help this was that the Audubon Society in New York City actually has volunteers that stand out all night on September 11th each year, and with binoculars, and they watch for birds. And when the bird count gets to be a certain level, then they tell the operators to shut off the lights, and they shut off the lights. And they wait a few minutes until all the birds clear out of the area and proceed on their migratory journey before they turn the light back on again. So that's an example, a really extreme example of what unshielded lights can do. Now, we don't have anything quite that extreme in Colorado, but we do have hundreds and hundreds of unshielded lights that cause problems for birds. And we have, millions of birds migrating through Colorado. And so it's important that we try to make it possible for them to complete their migratory journey. What are the problems? Well, first, birds use the stars to navigate at night. And sky glow, our light pollution, obscures the stars, so they can't see the stars. They don't know which direction is which. Birds turn, and researchers have found that birds turn and fly towards sky glow on the horizon. That's light pollution, the glowing air above cities that's caused by our lights. And so basically, a bird migrating way out in eastern Colorado will tend to turn toward the Front Range urban corridor and fly toward the cities. And then, of course, once they get closer to the cities, their situation becomes worse until it becomes really, really terrible. And many of them end up circling in confusion and ending up dying from exhaustion without being able to continue on their migratory journey. The third effect is that the glare from an individual unshielded light fixture on the ground can confuse birds. So, we don't have any huge displays like that one in New York City that would attract 16,000 birds at one time, but a single light might attract a dozen birds or 24 birds who end up circling until the light shuts off, which in some cases isn't until morning. And by then the birds are exhausted. So Here's what it looks like in eastern Colorado, way out on the plains, not near a city at all. This is a panoramic view of the horizon. And what you see is the sky glow coming from the Front Range urban corridor many miles away in the distance over the horizon, but the sky glow still invades way out in eastern Colorado. And you notice that the sky glow is way brighter than any star in the sky. You can't see any stars at all immediately in the area where the sky glow is. And if you look farther up toward the top of the photo and the sides, you can see tiny points of light, but they're clearly not nearly as bright as the sky glow from the light pollution. So that's what we're talking about. That's sky glow. So here's what, this is the same spot, only 3,000 feet up in the air from an airplane. So this is approximately how high a migrating bird would be, and over eastern Colorado plains, not over any city whatsoever, this is what they would see. Now they would see quite a few lights just on the ground, not too far away in rural eastern Colorado, but they see lots of light coming from the Front Range urban corridor, which from 3,000 feet up, you can see from a long ways away. Notice that every light on the ground in this picture is brighter than any light, any star in the sky in this picture. And that's a problem. So again, how can we help? The simple thing is to turn off lights, just flip the switch. It's that simple. The better long-term solution is to shield outdoor lights by either adding shields or replacing the fixture entirely to prevent light from being emitted upwards. And we'll come back to that as we go on. So some practical solutions here. First of all, what is shielding? What am I talking about? Well, first of all, shielding blocks the light source from view. So let's look at what that looks like in reality here. Here's a display. The 5 fixtures on the right are all turned on. They're all shielded, and therefore you cannot see the light source of any of these 5 fixtures. That is what we mean by shielding. It hides the light source. The 3 on the left are not shielded. They're not turned on because if I did turn them on, you wouldn't be able to see anything else because of the glare. So we leave them off. Those are a safety problem. They're a human safety problem in addition to being a problem for the birds. So it's not only a good thing for the birds to get rid of those, but it's a good thing for the humans to get rid of those too. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. So here's what a bird's eye view looks in a before and after situation. On the left are some street lights without any shielding. And then, as part of a project that replaced all the street lights with properly shielded street lights, and now the bird can no longer see the individual light sources. You can still see the pool of light on the ground on the street, but you cannot see the light sources. So those things that are like stars but way brighter are gone. And you can see how much better that is for a migrating bird and how much less confusing that would be if you were planning on using the stars to guide you on your journey. So here's a big thing a lot of humans bring up. A lot of people think, I've got to have my light because of safety reasons. They think that more light is always safer, period. And I'm here to tell you that is simply not true. That well-designed lighting is safer, but poorly designed lighting is a safety problem. In the picture on the right, you see there's lots of glare from that unshielded light, and you cannot see. There's a person standing in that gateway, and you cannot see them at all. I put my hand up and block the glare, and suddenly I can see the person standing in the gateway again. So if that lighting had just been designed properly to start with shielding, then it would have been safer for people. So well-designed lighting improves our safety. Bad lighting is bad for safety. So it's not just bad for birds, it's bad for humans too. So again, how can we help? The 2 things Lights Out Colorado talks about are the simple solution of turning off light switches as early as possible, during migration season, and shielding outdoor lights to prevent light from being emitted upwards. Turn off lights, shield lights. Shielding is the long-term good solution because that shielding is there every night all year round, and just turning off the lights helps for one night, but what about tomorrow night? So we want both. We want people to turn off lights that are not needed, and also to install shields wherever possible. So the IDA has 5 recommendations for how to choose lighting. First of all, be sure a light is useful. The light has a clear purpose, and that's in light of what I just said about more light is sometimes less safe. So it's not useful if it makes us less safe. so that's a consideration. Number 2, lighting should be targeted, meaning it should be aimed at the ground, not at the sky, and it should be shielded in a way that prevents light from going where it's not needed. So if lighting is going onto your neighbor's property, then that is light trespass, and that is illegal. In addition to being bad for the environment, it's against the law and hurting your neighbors as well. Number 3, low light levels, and suggestions for this have changed in recent years. Research has found that lower levels sometimes improve visibility. So, for example, there was one recent research study that was done. They took a typical street-lit scene and they measured what people could see, what they could recognize in that street-lit environment. And then they turned the lighting down by 50%, and they tested again, and they found that people could see more when the light was less intense. So low light is not only good for the environment, but it's better for humans in many cases too. Number 4, that lighting needs to be controlled, meaning that we need to use timers or motion sensors to control when the lighting is on, and only turn the lighting on when it's absolutely needed, and turn it off automatically when it's not needed. So the 20th century practice of having dawn to dusk lighting is bad, and we need to stop doing that. The lights come on when the sun goes down and the lights go off when the sun comes up. That is not a 21st century way to do things. We need to use timers or motion detectors to do this. And 5th, the color. And everyone thinks, well, white is white, right? But no, it's actually more subtle than that. And the American Medical Association has actually come out with a statement that indicates that no community in the United States should allow bluish white colored lights in their community. And unfortunately, many of the newer LED outdoor lights these days are kind of a bluish white color. And we've found, research studies have found that that's really bad for human health and it should be banned. So practical solutions, some things that we can actually do. First of all, a quick and easy thing is just to flip the switch or unplug the light if it's not needed, especially during heavy bird migration seasons in April, May, and August, September. But the better long-term solution is to replace unshielded fixtures with shielded fixtures, or install shields on existing fixtures. And I put some pictures there of some fixtures, but there are many hundreds of different possibilities for different applications that are all well shielded and better for the environment. And they're generally better for humans too. People end up saving money by replacing lights, and they end up with a safer environment for the humans, more value derived from the lighting because the lighting is pointed where it needs to be, and it's also better for the environment. So all of those things. So here's an aerial view of an area in Pueblo that you're probably familiar with. This image shows over 100 unshielded lights, each of which would be a problem for migratory birds. So those 1.3 million birds that were flying over Pueblo the other night, many of them were probably thrown off by some of these lights. Now, the yellow arrow in the bottom of that aerial view is the approximate location of that street level photo on the right. And that shows basically the basic street light is that cluster of 5 unshielded globes that you see on the left side. But then back a ways in the center of that parking lot is a fully shielded fixture. And that's what we're talking about. That's what we want. Now look back at the aerial photo and you'll notice you can see the light source of all the street lights, but you cannot see the light source on this shielded light that's in the parking lot. You see a pool of light on the ground in the parking lot, but you do not see where the light is coming from. And that's what we're looking for, shielded lights. So what if I don't personally own any outdoor lights? And personally, I don't own any outdoor lights. So this is an issue. But hopefully you've seen by now that it's a much bigger issue than on your personal property. It's something to talk with your city council about, talk to your school board about. Basically, what you need to do is go outside at night to one of these areas and do an inventory of what lights you see and what positive and negative things you see. And if you see unshielded lighting, you need to make note of that. And then you need to approach the manager, the owner, the city council with the various options. And their immediate knee-jerk reaction will be, well, that's fine, but we don't have money for that. They won't even listen to you. So in some way, you've got to get them to listen a little bit, because there are good ways to finance this. There are cities who have figured out really creative ways to finance such retrofits. One example nearby in Westcliff, the Custer County school system had many unshielded lights at one time, and the Dark Sky group there in Westcliff inventoried them and went to the city council or to the school board and said, we need to upgrade these lights. And of course, they immediately said, no, we don't have money to do that. And so they said, well, let's figure out a way so that you don't have to pay for it. And they went out and they raised money, and the volunteers raised enough money to pay for the upgrades. And so the school district not only got the brand new lights from the volunteers, but they also got lower electric bills month after month after month after month. So they got more money in their budget to pay for other things in the school rather than to waste on unneeded lighting. So there really are good ways to do it. Some cities have issued bonds in order to pay the upfront cost of replacing tens of thousands of lights, for example, and then the savings in electricity generally will pay back the bond, pay back the initial cost of the project. So there are some really good ways to figure out the financing. So that should not be a barrier that stops this from happening. Then there are some other suggestions that I put there. Timers or motion sensors, we talked about that. Eliminate light fixtures that are not needed, and you will be surprised at how many that you will find that are totally not needed. They're just put there because some designer thought, well, we should put a light everywhere. And there wasn't any need to have a light in that particular location. And that they can basically just take that light out and save the electricity, not spend it at all, and not hurt the environment. They can install shielding on individual lights. And in some cases that's possible. In other cases, you just kind of have to replace the whole fixture. So that's on a case-by-case basis. The other thing you can do is you can talk to your friends and neighbors about these issues. Most people really are glad to hear about this. as long as you avoid accusing anyone of wrongdoing. You don't go to your neighbor and say, you're causing a problem. You say, you talk about the general issue, and you let them come to the idea that maybe their lights are causing a problem. And that's usually the better way around the issue. If they think of the solution themselves, it's going to happen. If you try to get them to do something, they will dig in their heels and not do anything. So once again, the last thing that I can ask you all to do, everyone who's listening tonight, is to join our mailing list, to join us. As I said, it's free. You don't have to be a member of the IDA or of the Audubon Society. Many of our members are members of one of those organizations, but many are not. But the goal here is that you will get two or three email updates each migration season talking about bird migration in Colorado. So that is the Lights Out Colorado program. And I'm hoping that we can have some discussion or some questions here, perhaps.
That was really interesting, Richard. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard. We don't have any questions come in over comments, but I imagine Peg has a few questions lined up.
Well, I'd like to know if there are certain colors of lights, like street lights, that would be better for birds.
Well, unfortunately, it's kind of a complicated answer. And the answer is that different wavelengths affect different species in different ways. In general, for the benefit of humans, avoiding the bluish-white color is a really important thing. But in places like the Gulf Coast of Colorado, they have particular wavelength requirements because of nesting sea turtles on their beaches. We don't have nesting sea turtles here in Colorado. But each species has a little bit different reaction to the wavelengths. So the best advice I can say is that we need to follow the suggestions of the AMA and avoid that bluish white color for human benefit. And as long as they're shielded, then the color won't make a huge difference to the birds.
Okay.
So I guess following up on Peg's question, there would be an intensity of the light that would be a factor in whether it distracts the birds or not. So I imagine if we had like twinkle lights or the little sort of Christmas lights in your backyard, would that also affect?
That's much less of a problem. Obviously, the Tribune lights in New York City is a huge, incredibly intense thing. And so we're talking thousands of birds affected by that. But your normal light that you would have in a house, like a floodlight that's unshielded, has a big impact on birds too. Now, the little twinkle Christmas lights have much less effect, and those are probably not a problem. But I would guess that in most people's cases, they have at least a few completely unshielded, much more intense lights that do cause a problem.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I think Audubon was recommending not only to turn off your outside lights, but to close your curtains.
Yes.
Is that something you would endorse as well?
Audubon concern nationwide is for building collisions. And I didn't talk much about building collisions because they're not as big a problem in Colorado as they are in some other places like Houston and Chicago and New York City. It is still a problem. Birds do collide with buildings a lot. And so if we close our curtains in the evening, that keeps our indoor lights from attracting birds flying into the window and causing problems. Again, that's probably a little bit less of a migrating bird problem and more of a general bird problem. It affects resident birds more than migrating birds. Because once migrants are up there, they're like 2,000 feet above the ground. And so they're less likely to run into anything. So the navigational problem is a bigger issue when they're up and migrating.
Sure, that makes sense. And then you gave a hint about how to approach a local official, but how do you approach the local city council and get some real action?
It's tough because, like I say, I've talked to lots of governmental bodies, and almost every first reaction is, "That's great, but we don't have money." And they don't even listen to anything else. One technique that I've seen that works very well is getting a group of kids to go talk to the city council, because the politicians will let the kids speak and will actually listen and try to respond.
That's a good idea.
They're so tired of hearing adults get up there and complain at them hour after hour after hour, meeting after meeting, that it's really refreshing for them to see kids, and to see kids with something positive, a way that the city can help the environment and help birds, something that the kids really care about. They tend to listen to that. Now, there probably should be some adults with them to maybe also talk about and answer some questions and so forth. But kids have an amazing superpower with governmental bodies.
Good point.
I have seen, though, that sometimes school administrations kind of ignore kids. So that may not be the best answer for school boards. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, with your new library renovation, will you be doing any outdoor shielding of lights after hearing this?
Oh, you know what, Peg? I didn't. This wasn't really an issue before I listened to Richard present, and I will definitely pass this along as something to consider for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, a lot of communities, cities, and counties have building codes that restrict how outdoor lighting can be installed, and that building permit applicants are required to submit a plan that includes outdoor lighting, exactly what fixtures will be installed and exactly where they will be installed. And then the building permit inspectors will check to make sure that they were installed according to plan. So that's helpful in places. In my town, there is an ordinance that restricts outdoor lighting fixtures, and there are many towns that have such an ordinance, and that affects our building permit applications. I'm not aware if Pueblo has any such thing, but Boulder County also has an ordinance. And so if you are in unincorporated Boulder County, you have to apply for a building permit with the same restrictions, including the specifications of any lighting that you install, which is great.
Yeah, it sure is. Great. Let's see, I think that's all for me. Anything from you, Aaron?
Sure. I don't know. So you mentioned the geese migration, and then I guess larger birds, smaller birds. It just depends on their sort of biology and what they're attracted to or how they respond to light, I guess.
Yeah, we're all familiar with the birds that we've seen migrating in the daylight, like the Canadian geese in the V formation flying overhead. But that's only a small subset. Canadian geese are way larger than most nocturnal migrants. Most nocturnal migrants are like the songbirds, the warblers and such. So they're really small birds, and they're flying all by themselves, not in a flock, but all by themselves, 2,000 feet up in the air in the pitch black darkness. And they're using the stars to help guide them.
Wow, it's incredible.
It is incredible.
They have several tools that they use to help guide them, but stars are one of the main ones.
I had heard some of the birds flying over the Gulf of Mexico, heading towards Central America and so on. The outdoor, what are those, oil rigs in the Gulf with all those bright lights are confusing birds as they cross the Gulf.
I think it's pretty amazing that these little bitty birds undertake this like 600-mile journey across the Gulf of Mexico in the first place. These are not water birds. These are like warblers and things like that. The Baltimore Oriole that I mentioned there does this. They fly over the Gulf of Mexico. And so they can't land at all. until they find land. And of course, seeing lights on an oil platform is going to be like an incredible beacon and going to be a big problem.
Yeah.
But there are thousands and thousands of birds who make that journey across the Gulf of Mexico. It's really amazing that they can do it at all.
Exactly. That's for sure. Anything else, Aaron?
No, I think that's it. I just would like to thank Richard. Thank you so much for joining us and presenting on this really important topic. And Peg, as always, thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron.
And so the Lights Out Colorado website, the link is in the comments here, and so that will replay for anyone joining us at a later date through our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. And the contact information is there, not only for following Richard's presentation tonight, but I'm sure you can find contact information through the website. So thank you both for being here tonight, and we'll see you all next time, I suppose.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you very much.
Nice
All right.
job.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.